Hi there, wherever you found this small corner of night. I'm glad you're here. The lamps are low, the room is quiet, and outside, a gentle rain brushes the eaves like an old lullaby. Take a slow breath, feel the cool air settle, then let it drift away. No rush, no noise, just you and the hush between heartbeats. Imagine a narrow street of worn cobblestones, slick from the same kind of drizzle. Lanterns flicker in crooked windows, and somewhere a cartwheel creaks through the puddles. You follow the glow, the scent of wood smoke, the distant hum of laughter, until a wooden sign swings overhead, a simple barrel painted by uncertain hands. That friend is tonight's doorway. Beyond it waits a medieval tavern, rowdy, warm, utterly real. Every tale, every sound, every smell you'll hear, truly echoed in dusty records and forgotten ledgers. No fantasy, no embellishment, only history, breathing softly in the dark. So settle deeper beneath your blanket. Let the rain tap a steadier rhythm, and together we'll slip inside, past the iron-bound door, into a world where candlelight dances and time slows to a drowsy smile. Close your eyes and picture the moment just before you step inside. Rain whispers behind you, sliding down the back of your cloak, while the door ahead leans like an old friend who doesn't bother to stand straight anymore. You place a palm on knotted wood, feel how the grain presses back, cool, swollen from years of spilled ale. A breath, slow, the smell of wet straw mingles with smoke that drifts through the gaps, and somewhere deeper, a fiddle scrapes 3 hopeful notes before being swallowed by laughter. You push, boots grinding against slick stone, and the iron latch gives way with a sigh that might be relief or warning. It's hard to know. Warmth wraps you at once, thick and purposeful, as if the room has decided you belong here, whether you plan to or not. The first thing you hear is the hearth, not crackling but breathing, logs exhaling resin, and ember in steady rhythm. A low ceiling forces you to lower your shoulders. Beams blackened by centuries crowd overhead like rafters in a barn at dusk. Candle flame dances on chipped mugs, on faces flushed by heat and half-remembered songs. Somewhere to your left, a rooster feather clings to a cap that should have retired years ago. Take one cautious step, and the floor shifts under you, dirt packed firm but never quite level. Someone scattered straw to keep the mud from winning, yet the ground still glistens, eager to prove straw wrong. Your boot sinks a fingertip, squelches, then steadies. The scent that rises is complicated. Yeast gone sour at the rim of an open barrel, onions seething in a black pot, wool damp against weary skin, and beneath it all the metallic hush of rain cooling the roof. You taste salt on your lip, maybe from the walk, maybe from invisible sea roads bringing fish to the market, maybe from a tear you won't admit escaped when wind hit your face outside. Voices weave around you in loose braid, a whisper about coin owed, a boast of a pig the size of a mule, a verse half sung about a goose that outwitted a priest. Nobody quite agrees on the melody, yet they sing anyway. Every syllable lands heavy, then rolls to the rafters, where smoke gathers like old gossip too tired to leave. You notice the barkeep before he notices you. His hands are the colour of dark bread crust, elbows wide, eyes sharp as roofing nails. One look tells you that if trouble enters by the door, it will leave by the throat. But his nod is small, almost gentle, an unspoken truce. Drink first, pay later, argue never. Find a bench, any bench. The one beside the hearth creaks but doesn't break, which in this place counts as hospitality. You sit, cloak steaming, and the heat climbs your spine like a lazy cat, settling between shoulder blades. Across the table, a woman rolls dice carved from bone. They rattle, tumble, pause. 6 and 3. She smiles without showing teeth, gathers the bones, and invites you to try. In her voice, you hear the coast. Gulls in the distance, mornings that begin before light. You shake your head for now, fingers still tingling from the cold, and she shrugs as if she already knows the ending of every story that starts here. Listen, the tavern speaks in layers. There's the bass note of boots shifting for balance, the mid-tone of mugs landing, the bright scatter of a lute that refuses to stay in tune, and threading through it all the steady drip at the doorway where rain insists on visiting. Someone somewhere is mending a saddle. The leather sighs under the needle, carrying the faint smell of tallow and travel. Another soul mutters a prayer in a dialect you can't place, words rising and falling like the last embers of a chant. Touch the rim of the mug now set before you. Coarse clay, warm, slick near the lip, where countless mouths have paused. The barkeep's daughter slides it over without a word, her braid swinging like a pendulum to mark time between chores. Steam curls upward. It smells of barley, of patience, of days measured in grain and firewood. You lift it, feel weight settle into your palm, and sip. The ale is cloudy, slightly sweet, thicker than water, yet softer than memory. It coats your tongue, hums through your chest, loosens a knot you didn't know you tied. Outside, thunder grumbles its distant approval, but inside the storm is owned by a candle shadow. Watch how it climbs a stone wall, pauses over a carved initial, then slips across the curve of a stranger's cheek. The shadow looks like a question you haven't asked, perhaps about the road ahead, perhaps about the bruised knuckles of the man 3 stools down, perhaps about why stories survive longer than the people who live them. You breathe out, the room exhales with you, as though both of you agreed to carry less weight for a while. Now feel the tavern settle around you, not silent, never silent, but slower, like a tide turning beneath moonlight. Dice continue their quiet rebellion. The fiddle finds its missing note, and somewhere at your back, a dog circles twice before lying against your boots, offering warmth without promise. You glance toward the door. Rain still falls, but it is farther away now, muffled by wool and wood and the haze of smoke curling toward a cracked chimney. Stay here as long as you like. The night outside can wait. Roads rarely wander off without their travellers. For now, the tavern is your roof, its fire, your hearth, its noise a blanket thick enough to tame the chill. Let the echoes layer, let the shadows dance, let the taste of grain linger where words once troubled your tongue. And if sleep begins to tiptoe behind your eyes, trust it. History will keep watch, murmuring in the timbers, guarding the door until dawn folds the rain into quiet memory. Smoke drifts, low and blue, across the tavern's rafters, settling where the thatch sags like tired shoulders. Near the hearth, the fire shrinks, then flares again, feeding on a log so wet it hisses in protest. No one notices. They are busy with mourning, if a tavern ever truly has such a thing. Bread crust echoes under a knife. Someone coughs rough into his sleeve. Dice click once, twice, then hide inside a closed fist. Somewhere behind the bar, the keeper hums a line of plainchant he learned as a boy before coin and ale replaced prayer. The tune wanders off key, but the room stays with him. Outside, dawn hasn't bothered to arrive. Rain still noses at the shutters, slip-sliding along warped planks before dripping to the clay below. Chickens cluck from a crate in the corner. Payment for last night's lodging, though they don't know it yet. The only clear light comes from the hearth, orange on black stone, making every cup and jawline glow as though cast in copper. A traveller stands just inside the doorway, cloak blotched, hat in hand, mud at the hem. He is nobody special, and everyone knows it, which is safest in a place like this. He edges toward the fire, steam rising from wool, as if his very bones must thaw before speech. Beside him, a one-eyed dog follows, settling at his boots without invitation, tail thumping once against the straw, then still. Across the room, two farmers argue barley prices. Voices low, faces red, each convinced the other has stolen a measure of sun the fields never saw. Their words slide beneath the music of spoons against bowls, under the scrape of a bench pulled closer to heat, until everything folds into a single breathy murmur. The tavern's pulse. Overhead, beams groan. Perhaps they remember storms, older than any man here. Perhaps they merely complain about holding up one more night of stories. Either way, the sound belongs. A wooden sigh amid a morning that refuses to be young. For a moment, nothing moves but the embers. Then the keeper straightens, wipes his hands on a rag the colour of last year's dusk, and calls for bowls. Pottage, thicker than rumour, finds its way to the tables. Ale, flat but honest, follows. Outside, a crow declares the day begun, late but loud enough to count. Rain answers by quieting, as though struck by the bird's certainty. And so the tavern inhales. Bread breaks, mugs rise, voices knit themselves into a single coarse blanket of hunger and half-remembered dreams. The traveller lifts his cup, drinks deep, and in that small act joins the living weight of history housed within these four crooked walls, where dawn is measured not by light, but by the first swallow that chases the cold from a man's chest. They call him Ralph Brewer, though no one has seen him brew anything but trouble in 20 winters. Broad-shouldered, beard like burnt rope, he moves behind the plank bar as if the boards were part of his spine. His left hand cups a dented pitcher. The right rests on a cudgel polished smooth by midnight arguments. One thumb is missing, bitten off, they say, by a man who later swallowed teeth instead of ale. Ralph was once a wagon guard on the North Road, back when merchants feared wolves more than taxes. Bandits took his coin, frost took 2 toes, and plague took a love he wrote letters to. So he took the tavern. Inherited, some whisper, rested, others insist. However it happened, stone and soot remember his name better than any priest. He knows every patron's debt by the tilt of a hat, the scrape of a boot, the way a man avoids the corner where unpaid mugs hang like gallows warnings. His voice seldom rises, but when it does, the rafters flinch. A single nod from him settles wages, stills knives, redeems lost chickens, and, on rare soft nights, buys silence for a widow who needs sleep more than ale. Across the hearth sits Mother Cibber, ancient as the oaken door, fingers stained with juniper and rosemary. She mixes remedies in cracked bowls, bee balm for cough, ground comfrey for bruises, a whisper of henbane when grief outshouts pain. Travellers trust her more than monks, perhaps because her price is a story instead of a tithe. She listens, stirs and nods. Somewhere in that nod lives permission to remember the dead without shame. Between them, keeper and herb wife, the tavern breathes its uneasy peace. Ralph guards the walls, Zibby guards the people inside them. He measures nights in spilled ale. She measures dawns in empty cups returned for medicine. When his stare meets her smile, a pact renews. He will break the bones that threaten order. She will mend the bones that remain. The room feels smaller when they speak in low tones. Two weathered anchors holding fast against the river of noise. And though rain slants against the shutters, though the dog dreams of colder roads, every soul inside knows the truth. As long as Ralph's cudgel rests and Sibby's herbs steep, this crooked house stands firmer than any royal charter. Rain drums the thatch, smoke coils above the hearth, and the tavern clocks its night in wooden heartbeats. A peddler unwraps damp socks, holds them to the blaze, then dozes upright while steam ghosts from wool. Nearby, a mill hand counts coins, 4 coppers short, yet still orders stew thick as mortar. Hunger bargains better than math. In the left corner, 2 clerks from the abbey play at dice. One quotes scripture between throws. The other swears the bones are blessed. They lose a week's stipend before the candles burn half low. Penance, it seems, arrives early this season. The tavern keeper watches, not to judge, only to remember, because debt, like winter, always circles back. A widow named Bridget rocks her infant beneath a tattered shawl. Each lull presses her farther from grief, closer to the hush of embers. When the babe whimpers, Mother Sibby pours a thimble of fennel tea, slips it warm between tiny lips, and hums a tune older than the castle road. No one speaks while the melody wanders. Even the shutters settle, as though wooden lungs hold breath for the child. Outside, wind rattles a shutter hook, clang, clang, answering the blacksmith's hammer from memory. Inside, heat warps the air, rafters sweat resin that pops in the flames. A farm boy, cheeks freckled, boots too large, delivers eggs to the kitchen, then lingers for stories. Ralph waves him close, points at a scar shaped like a bent nail, and tells of wolves that once stalked these hills. The boy's eyes widen. He'll dream of fangs tonight, but also of courage, because the tale ends with dawn and safety and a fire much like this one. Ale sloshes, benches creak, and somewhere a lute attempts a love song, out of tune. No one minds. The notes stumble but refuse to fall, and that stubbornness feels heroic after enough need. A mason sings along, voice gravel rough, changing half the words to fit the rhythm of his past. Laughter rises, falls, then rests like cloak, over shoulders, grown tired from toil. Near midnight, the door heaves open. A draught sweeps the rushes, and a merchant of spices staggers in, nostrils flared against stable-yard musk. His satchel jingles with tin vials, cinnamon, pepper, a rumour of saffron. He offers a pinch to the hearth circle, and in return Ralph grants him a seat, close to heat, safe from pickpockets who respect neither prayer nor price. The scent of foreign dust mingles with smoke. Noses lift, remembering distant summers none here have seen. At the long table, women from the wash-house compare bruises of soap and river stone. Their laughter is bright, but their palms are raw, the cost of linens that will outlast them. Ralph slides a jug their way, without charge. The youngest blushes, yet the eldest meets his eye with a nod heavy as anvils. Debts of kindness are recorded deeper than parchment. Here they last until famine or forgetfulness, whichever arrives first. Mother Sibby moves again, a comfrey poultice for the mason's swollen knuckles, lavender under the dice table to cool tempers before they kindle. She speaks little, but her silence instructs. Breathe, swallow, endure. When she pauses beside the spice merchant, he whispers of throat pain from desert winds. She mixes honey and thyme, adds one drop of something amber and nameless. He drinks, coughs, then smiles, surprised at relief. A hush of gratitude drifts across the benches, soft as dust, real as iron. The night lengthens, shadows stretch like cats across the floor. Candles gutter, tallow tears hiss in pools of their own ending. Ralph rings a brass bell once, never twice, and voices settle the way snow settles on graves. Yet no one leaves. They lean into the dim, sharing what warmth remains. A boot against a boot, a laugh caught between ribs, the slow certainty that even sorrow must kneel to a well-banked fire. A farmer recites market prices, barley up, oats down, while his wife mends a ripped sleeve with thread pulled from her hem. She ties the final knot, kisses the frayed cloth, and hands it back as though gifting armour. Across the room, the abbey clerks have pawned their last coin for a crust of bread. Ralph divides the loaf, scrapes butter the colour of dawn, and sets it before them without tally. The clerks murmur, grace not to heaven, but to him. He shrugs, stares at the door, and listens to the wind decide whether it will stay the night. Somewhere between tick and tock, though no clock marks the hour, fatigue seeps through mortar, and faces droop like burned wicks. The peddler wakes, finds his socks nearly dry, and thanks the hearth with a sigh. The farm boy yawns wide enough to swallow regret, then curls on a grain sack, boots still on. Bridget's child sleeps, Bridget too, chin on chest, shawl fluttering with each breath. Mother Zibby douses her herbs, wraps the mortar in cloth, and nods toward Ralph. He lifts the heavy bar, slides it home, and the tavern shifts from refuge to cradle. Outside, rain softens to mist. Inside, snores rise and fall, a shared tide across strangers who will remember none of each other's names come dawn. Ralph places one more log on the fire, slow, careful, like tucking a blanket over the whole room. Sparks climb, searching for lost stars. He watches until heat settles, until the last mug ceases to tremble, until even his own heartbeat seems borrowed. Then, with cudgel across his knees, he sits, listening to quiet cradle quiet, and thinks perhaps of wolves no longer near. Thus the tavern sleeps, walls sigh, ashes whisper, and midnight slips unnoticed into the patient loom of morning. Outside, the world remains cold, uncertain. Inside, the crooked house breathes, alive beneath its thatch of dreams. Some nights, when the hearth settled and the rafters ceased their slow complaint, a hush would fall across the benches, a hush thick enough to stir old questions. In that pause, a man might lift his eyes from ale, see his own face ghosted in the tin cup, and wonder how many winters remained between breath and burial. No sermon followed, only ember light and the restless shuffle of straw. They had laboured, traded, sinned, yet the tavern levelled every tale. A miller's cracked hands looked no different from a scribe's ink-stained fingers. Once soot blurred the lines. Wealth, sorrow, even faith slipped their badges beneath the smoke. and for a heartbeat the room felt equal in its weariness. One could taste a fragile mercy in that sameness, brief but real. Outside, rain worried the eaves, steady, patient, unpersuaded by prayer. Inside, the spice merchant fingered a vial of saffron and thought of ports he would never see again. Bridget, half dreaming, measured tomorrow against a child's fragile ribs. The Abbey clerks weighed lost coin against the promise of absolution. No verdict rose, only a quiet notion that living was less about virtue than staying warm, staying fed, staying kind. When the ledger ran thin, the hearth spat, the spell loosened, and voices resumed their climb toward dawn. Yet under every word lingered that earlier silence, like a thin seam of gold veined through common rock, reminding each listener that night could strip a man to questions long after daylight had crowned him with answers. The hour slips, unseen, toward its darkest hush, and the tavern breathes like an old hound settling near dying coals. One by one, voices surrender to drowsy murmurs. A last mug is lifted, half toast, half apology, then set aside, empty, forgotten. Outside, the rain has thinned to a patient drizzle, tapping the shutters with a rhythm older than prayer, gentler than doubt. Within, embers collapse into themselves, soft red secrets, while smoke drapes the rafters in fading veils. He who tended the fire draws the iron grate closed, a small creed of care amid ruin and revel. Somewhere a lute string hums its final sigh, then stills, leaving only heartbeat silence and the slow, even breathing of those who remain. And so the night settles, neither forgiving nor cruel, simply there, holding each sleeper alike beneath its broad, unjudging cloak, until dawn asks its quiet questions and the story must stir again. Dawn creeps, reluctant, through a lattice of soot-stained shutters, pale amber, half ashamed of what night has left behind. The tavern lies in a hush that is not quite silence, more a low, collective exhale, tables leaning like weary soldiers, benches strewn with cloaks still damp from yesterday's rain. Somewhere outside, a cock crows, once then thinks better of it. The sound fractures, echoing across puddles that shine like tarnished mirrors. Inside, the hearth wears only a crust of grey, embers hidden, heart still warm, and smoke clings to the rafters in thin, bruised ribbons. A stray beam slips through a cracked window, touches a mug toppled on its side, and the thin ale within shivers, catching light with a meek, amber tremor before settling again. Near the doorway, the heavy bar dog rises, stretches, sniffs the air for promises of bread crust or kindness. Finding neither, he turns thrice upon the straw and sinks back into the shape of last night's dreams. On the floor, a dice cup lies overturned, ivory cubes frozen mid-fortune, while a forgotten purse rests open, coins dull as unspoken apologies. The tavern keeper steps from the stairwell, boots soft, eyes harder than dawn. He pauses, listening, not for danger, but for the fragile measure of peace that lives only in these earliest breaths of morning. Then, with a slow, deliberate gesture, he lifts the iron poker and stirs the embers. A small practiced thunder that wakes the fire, the room, the stories not yet told. Sparks leap, brief as faith, before falling back to glow among the coals, tiny banners proclaiming that day, despite all reasonable objection, has come. They called him Edric of Wyke, a broad-shouldered brewer with smoke-black hands and a voice rough as millstone. Long before the king's tax and the priest's blessing, he walked these roads, Barrel wagon creaking, hop scent drifting, a quiet rhythm that stitched one valley to the next. Edric learned his trade from a nameless monk who measured days by yeast and prayer. From him he kept two things, a battered oak mash paddle and a habit of speaking only when night was thick enough to hide regret. His beard, grizzled, carried the memory of spilled ale. His cloak, patched in 3 shades of brown, bore the bite of more winters than he cared to count. Yet under the soot and sweat lived a mind precise as a merchant's scale. He could taste a wort and tell you which hillside grew the barley, which riverstone cooled the fermenting tub. Travellers trusted him, thieves respected him, lords tolerated him, for a tavern without Edric's casks was a prayer without a god. On market eves he'd arrive unannounced, rolling barrels that moaned like old hounds, and the village hearts would lift, though no one said why. Perhaps it was the way he greeted the poorest stable boy before the richest reeve, or the quiet coin he slipped to widows whose hearths burned low. Rumour claimed he'd once carried a fallen knight 10 miles through sleet, stopping only to whisper the Lord's Prayer where sword met flesh. Others swore they saw him refuse coin from a bishop whose tongue dripped scorn, turning instead to pour a draught for the bishop's shivering scribe. Truth lies tangled in such tales, but 2 things are certain. His barrels never ran sour, and his word never bent. Now, this morning, he stands beside the hearth, hand on that ancient paddle, eyes watching sparks chase smoke into rafters. He has come again, not for profit, but for promise. The promise that ale, warm and honest, might keep a hard world gentle for one more turning of the sun. Rain has eased, but mist still drifts through the alleyways, thin as old lace. Edric lifts the latch of the tavern yard, shoulders against the weight, and the gate yields with a groan older than memory. Inside, dawn is a hush of embers, tables crooked, benches damp, straw scattered like forgotten straw-plated coins. He crosses the floor, boots leaving dark prints, and nudges a log on the hearth. Sparks rise, spiral, fade. The room exhales warmth. First task, tap the night-cooled barrel. He wipes the iron spigot with linen, listens for the hollow heart echo, then drives the mallet, one measured strike. Amber seeps, thick and patient, into a wooden pitcher. It foams just enough to whisper that yeast still lives. Across the lintel hangs a row of clay mugs turned mouth down, each marked by a different hand. Edric writes them one by one, knuckles brushing initials carved when the king still wore a child's crown. He pauses at the smallest cup, chipped, lopsided, kept for a farmer loss last winter. A nod, no words, remembrance done. Outside, hooves splash through puddles. A carter calls for room near the oven wall. Edric unlatches the side door, beckons the man towards shelter, and helps guide the mule into a crooked stall. No charge, just a muttered, "Mind the roof drip," and the carter grins, surprise softened by fatigue. Back inside, barley porridge simmers in a blackened pot, oats popping like tiny drumbeats. He stirs with the mash paddle's worn end, same paddle, new purpose, and drops a curl of salt. Steam carries the scent of last year's harvest, and the tavern begins to smell less of night and more of morning. Villagers drift in, a seamstress rubbing sleep from her eyes, a boy clutching 3 eggs, a reeve counting taxes under his breath. Edric meets each gaze, offers silence or jest as needed. Service here is measured in mood before coin. He pours half mugs first. No soul should greet sunrise with a full draught. A shout rises at the far table, a dispute over grain weights. Edric does not hurry. Instead, he carries 2 bowls, sets them down, and speaks low, steady. Eat while you argue. Hunger makes the tongue sharp. The men mutter, spoon porridge, argument cooling with the steam. Mid-morning brings the cooper, palms blistered, seeking warmth for his tools. Edric clears a space by the embers, offers a rag of tallow to oil the hoop driver. They speak of barrel staves, river levels, taxes that grow like weeds. Between words, Edric checks the kettle, adjusts the flue, wipes moisture from the sill. Small gestures that keep a house breathing. By noon, sunlight pushes through shutter cracks, turning smoke into thin gold ribbons. Bread arrives from the baker's son, loaves burnt on one edge, pale on the other. Edric rips a piece, tastes, nods, and teaches the boy the trick of turning the peel midway. Lesson costs nothing. Gratitude weighs more than coin. Somewhere beyond the walls, church bells toll, slow, deliberate, counting debts of time. Patrons pause, cross themselves, return to quiet meals. Edric wipes the counter, sets out fresh rushes on the floor, and breathes the hush that follows honest labour. Thus the day stretches, barrel to cup, fire to ash, quarrel to calm. No triumph trumpeted, no villain vanquished, only the steady craft of keeping hunger, cold, and solitude at bay. And in that craft, Edric's life glows like an ember under peat, unseen by poets, yet warm enough to carry a village through the turning of the year. Midday settles, a slow hush, like dust drifting between sunbeams. Edric rests the paddle, leans against the oak post, and lets the tavern breathe without him. He listens, no arguments now, only spoons tapping bowls, a child's quiet giggle, the hearth ticking as sap bursts in the log. Moments like this remind him why he never joined the soldiers marching south. Steel is loud, but peace, when it comes, speaks softer than rain. His gaze drifts to the rafters, beams blackened by stories older than his father's bones. How many faces has this roof watched? Lovers whispering promises, widows counting coins, strangers tracing maps in Spilldale, all gone, yet their sighs linger, threaded into the timber. Edric wonders, when walls remember so much, what weight must memory carry in a man? He feels it sometimes, heavy as a full cask. The nights he can't recall his mother's voice, yet can name every debt owed since midsummer. Duty fills pockets, memory fills silences. And silences, he's learned, keep a tavern standing. Outside, the church bell marks none too exactly the 6th hour. Inside, a single straw flutters from the loft, lands on his sleeve, stays, light, persistent. He brushes it away, smiles at the small rebellion of chance, and thinks, there is order, and there is living. One must leave room for both. A breath, a nod to the quiet gods of hearth and barrel. Then he straightens, wipes flour from his palms, and steps back into motion, because calm, like ale, must be served before it turns, and someone always is reaching for the cup. The hush lingers, just long enough for the room to breathe, to remember itself. Edric lifts a fresh log, sets it slow into the embers. Sparks drift upward like tiny pilgrims, vanish against the soot-dark eaves. The hearth answers with a low sigh, and warmth rolls out, steady, forgiving. A lone hound pads across the floor, circles, settles beneath the bench, where a merchant once bragged of gold. Now only crumbs remain, bread hard as truth, crumbs soft as memory. Both disappear before dawn. Outside, rain gathers again. He hears it in the gutters, in the pause of passing voices. Inside, mugs rest idle, shadows stretch long, and the tavern keeper, just for a blink, lets his eyelids close. Tomorrow barrels will need patching, debts, tallying, roofs, mending. But tonight, between the creak of timber and the gentle crack of burning sap, he keeps the silence whole, not to hold it forever, only to taste it, share it, then let it drift, like steam, into the rafters. So the fire settles, the room exhales, and the night moves forward, quiet, watched, alive, toward whatever story waits beyond the door. Night deepens, yet the tavern walls keep its claws at bay. Beyond the shutters, the rain relents, leaving only a hush like held breath, and the slow rolling mist that rises from cobblestones soaked since dusk. Lanterns gutter along the crooked lane, their flames bruised by wind. One by one, they fail, until a single wick survives outside the tavern door. Its glow small, defiant, almost tender. Under that frail halo, puddles glimmer, broken barrels slump, and somewhere farther off, a church bell marks the hour with a tone too weary to finish its own echo. Inside, the air shifts, smoke thins, revealing rafters black as river stone, and ropes of garlic strung years ago, now brittle, dusty, and full of forgotten fragrance. Tables stand abandoned except for a few chipped mugs, each holding a fingerprint of ale, a trace of someone's laughter or someone's lie. By the hearth, embers pulse, red to gold to grey, cast in brief murals on the wall. A night's shadow, a farmer's slump, a bard's bent rim. They flicker, fade, return, stories made of light and wood smoke. In this pregnant quiet, you might hear the tavern breathe. A beam settles. The dog under the bench sighs, deep, grateful. Rain taps the thatch in slow confession. And above it all, the tavern keeper stirs the coals with an iron poker worn thin at the tip. Each spark that leaps is counted, named, released. He glances toward the shuttered windows, toward the hush of streets slick with memory, then back to the flames, as if weighing which darkness he trusts more. Outside lies the unknown, within the known but restless. Either way, dawn is hours away, and every hour will need tending. So the keeper straightens, wipes soot on his apron, and sets 3 empty mugs beside the hearth. An invitation to whoever enters next, or perhaps an apology to whoever never will. The mist presses harder against the walls. The lone lantern beyond the door flutters, but does not die. Someone moves near the hearth, a woman in a faded wool gown, sleeves rolled, hair bound beneath a plain linen coif. She is Marjorie, though no sign outside bothers to carve her name. To most, she's just the alewife, keeper of foam and rumour, owner of 3 scars and a smile that never quite reaches her eyes. You notice first the sound she carries, wooden patterns striking dirt, tap, drag, tap, steady as a mill wheel. Then the smell, roasted malt clinging to her skin, sweeter than the smoke that stains the rafters. Finally, the sight, hands the colour of dark bread, fingers nicked by years of stoking fires, stir and mash, swat in hands that linger too long over a coin. She sets a pitcher on the bench opposite you, wipes the rim with a square of cloth that was white winters ago, and, without lifting her gaze, says only, "Thirst can be cured. Everything else," a pause, a shrug, the faintest tilt of amusement, "we leave to the saints." Marjorie was born when King Edward still hunted on horseback, when plague was a rumour carried on cold winds. She has buried 2 brothers, outlived 1 husband, and learned, somewhere between grief and harvest, that courage can taste a lot like barley soaked in well water at dawn. People think she stays behind the bar because she loves coin. Yet every night, after the shutters drop, she pours the dregs onto the earth. One slow libation for the silent, she whispers, and for the days that never came back. Watch her a moment longer. See how she tips her head, listening, not to conversation, but to the tavern itself. Joists creaking, embers sighing, ale settling inside oak. She knows that language better than Latin, better than prayer. And when strangers boast, when soldiers brag, when bards bend truth until it sings, Marjorie simply smiles, fills another cup, lets the stories rise and fall like yeast in summer heat. Tonight, her tavern is your shelter. Her measured nod is your welcome. Drink gently. She is the keeper of more than ale. She is the memory of every soul who ever crossed this threshold. And she is already adding you to the list, somewhere between hope and happenstance. Morning slides into noon, and the tavern, already warm with breath and ash, settles into its daily rhythm. Marjorie moves from barrel to hearth, from hearth to doorway, a quiet metronome of chores, filling jugs, tasting broth, brushing straw into tidy piles that will be untidy again before the hour dips. Outside, the street hisses with drizzle, but inside the only rain is ale splashing onto wood. The room absorbs it, sighs, and asks for more. A reeve stops first, leather cloak still damp, face lined by years of counting grain that is never his. He pays with 2 pennies and a promise, drinks slowly, watching the liquid settle as if numbers might float to the top. Marjorie listens without listening, offers a heel of bread, a nod, and that single word that keeps secrets better than lock or key. Maybe. The reeve exhales, the promise dissolves. Near the door, a peddler unfolds bolts of faded ribbon, scarlet, then blue, then something he calls Emperor's Violet. No one buys, yet every hand must touch. Colour is rarer than coin, rarer even than trust. Each ribbon slides back into the peddler's basket. A soft surrender, commerce postponed until harvest or luck. By the hearth, 2 masons' apprentices trade stones for stories. One sketches with soot upon the wall, 3 lines, a curve, the shape of a new arch for St. Mary's porch. The other nods, pretends to understand geometry he will not meet for months, then laughs when Marjorie drops stew into their bowls. Salt, onion, a whisper of marrow, nothing more, yet the boys eat as if the soup remembers feasts they have only heard sung. The dog wakes, stretches, circles beneath the bench claimed by an aging soldier who swears a scar on his cheek came from a Saracen blade, though everyone knows it was a jealous miller's wife and a spoon. Each time the tale is told, the spoon lengthens, wood to iron, iron to steel, until the scar glows heroic beneath candle soot. No one corrects him. Lies are cheaper than steel and twice as comforting. Smoke rises, curls beneath rafters blackened by last winter's chill. Above, an iron hook swings gently. No meat today, just memory of meat. Still the scent lingers, a ghost made of tallow and thyme. A minstrel arrives, lute wrapped in oilcloth, coughs a greeting toward Marjorie, and receives a mug in trade for silence. He sits near the apprentices, plucks a single string, plink, testing the room's patience. They grant him none. He drinks, tunes, waits. Music belongs to night, not to afternoon chores. Outside, church bells mark tierce, their bronze throats clearing fog. Inside, Marjorie lights a fresh taper, and the tavern resets, flame answering bell, bell answering day. She pours small beer for a girl no older than 12, barefoot, eyes bright with errands. The child delivers bread to the reeve, ribbon to the peddler, a message to the soldier. Your wife says the roof still leaks. The soldier winces, the spoon scar itches. Life, like ale, comes in circles. A gust slips through the door. Hay, horse, distant rain, dancing papers pinned to the post. Taxes due, a hanging announced, a feast deferred. Marjorie presses the parchment flat. Though she cannot read it, still she knows the weight of words. She touches ink that names men already gone, then wipes her hand on her apron, trading sorrow for another jug. Mid-afternoon hush arrives, not silence, but a softer murmur, shaped by full bellies and half-paid debts. Tankards clink slower, benches creak lower. Even the dog rests his muzzle upon crossed paws and dreams of bones too large to chew. The peddler hums, the minstrel answers, 2 notes, nothing more. Steam drifts from the stew pot, blurs the soldier's scar, blurs Marjorie's eyes, blurs the edge between this moment and the 1,000 moments before it. And so the hours roll, smooth as barley beneath a millstone. Coins change hands, stories molt from truth to feathered fable. The hearth devours another log. Outside, the drizzle eases. Inside, the tavern gathers its warmth, waiting as always for dusk to unlock the louder music of men. As you sit by the hearth, watching that low fire lick the soot-blackened stones, you can't help but wonder how much of this life is chosen and how much simply endured. The reeve counts pennies by the crackle of logs. The peddler unfurls ribbons he may never sell. The apprentices carve dreams into smoky walls they might never finish. All of them so tethered to this moment, yet drifting toward tomorrow they can scarcely imagine. In our own world we chase comfort. Soft beds, warm baths, endless choice. Here comfort is a dry bench, a stale loaf, an ale thick with grain, and still somehow this place pulses with belonging. There is honesty in the grime, solidarity in shared hunger, hope in the fire's embers that refuse to die. Perhaps that is the real magic of a medieval tavern, that in hardship we discover kinship, in scarcity we find laughter, in the simplest stew we taste life's sweetness. You draw in the smoke, let it fill your lungs and settle in your thoughts. The soldier's scar, the mason's drawing, the merchant's ribbon, each holds its own story of risks taken and paths abandoned. Maybe none of it matters beyond this single night. Or perhaps every choice beats like a hammer against anvil, forging who we become. For a moment, you close your eyes to the din. Only the hush of embers, the drip of ale, the soft murmur of distant rain. You realize then that history isn't written only in grand deeds or towering walls. It lives in these small moments of shared firelight, these silent reflections beneath candles' glow, moments we carry forward long after the embers die. You rise from the hearth, the last glow of charcoal breathing its faint orange sigh behind you, the room easing into a hush that feels almost gentle now. Ale settles in your stomach, warmth lingering where the fire once licked your boots, and for a heartbeat everything slows. Voices soften, tankards tilt in lazy arcs. The mongrel beneath the table finally curls into a circle of quiet. You draw your cloak tighter, brush a fleck of ash from your sleeve, and let the tavern's rough lullaby carry you toward the door. Clinks, murmurs, the distant patter of rain returning. No grand farewells here, just nods between strangers who are no longer quite strangers. A half smile from the barkeep that means safe travels. Pay tomorrow. Outside, the street glistens, puddles catching candlelight like scattered coins. The air is sharp with wood smoke and promise. You breathe it in, taste the salt of sweat and soot, and feel a small, stubborn hope kindle inside your ribs. Perhaps the mud will dry by dawn. Perhaps you'll find a softer bed, or perhaps you'll wander back when the night grows lonely again, drawn by the simple magic of shared hunger, shared laughter, shared fire. For now you step into the dark, boots squelching, heart steady, and the tavern door closes behind you with a creak that feels almost like a lullaby. Dusk slides over the village like a slow-moving shadow. One moment, the rooftops still catch copper light. The next, they fade into indigo, and the tavern's windows glow, small squares of ember against the deepening blue. Beyond the last plume of chimney smoke, the fields stretch silent, their furrows dark and damp from the afternoon rain, each puddle holding a sliver of sky that drains its colour by the heartbeat. A cart creaks along the rutted road, wheels muddy, lantern swinging low. The driver hums something half-remembered, the kind of tune men borrow from church bells and forget by morning. Nearby, a stray chicken hops the gutter, pecks once at nothing, then disappears behind a stack of split pine. Evening chores wind down, a widow pulls her shutter tight, a boy lifts pails from the well, water spilling in silver ribbons over his boots, while a dog snaps at flies too tired to bark. And through all of it, the air changes, carrying the first chill of night. Wood smoke settles in the chest, hay sweetens the breeze, and somewhere far off a church bell counts 6, then pauses as though the hour itself is listening. In that pause, the village feels suspended, caught between labour and rest, light and dark, sin and prayer, waiting for the tavern door to swing wide again, for laughter to rise, for trouble to stretch its limbs. For now, though, only the quiet speaks, and it speaks softly, promising nothing more than another ordinary night, which, as any old man will tell you, is a promise worth keeping. They call him Father Gervas, though no one remembers if he ever took holy orders, only that he arrived 20 winters ago with a travel-worn psalter, a limp that clicks on cold nights, and a laugh too loud for a priest. He claims to have copied books in the scriptorium at Saint-Omer before the French burned it. Says smoke still stains his dreams, curling through the margins like devil's ink. And when the hearth is low, he'll show the faint scorch on his left wrist, proof, perhaps, or just good theatre. By day, he tends a patch of physic herbs behind the tavern wall. Rue for fevers, comfrey for bones, tansy for worms. Simple things a village doctor might know. But come dusk, he trades mortar and pestle for stories. Stories paid in ale. Gervais speaks slowly, as though each word must cross an ocean of memory. The room leans closer, drawn into the undertow. He tells of the year of bad bread, when rye turned black with ergot, and men dreamed spiders under their skin. He speaks of the great council at Clermont. He was a barefoot novice then, swept up in the thunder of Pope Urban's call, watching knights vow to win Jerusalem or die trying. And many did, he murmurs, tracing a circle on the table, as if mapping graves no one bothers to mark. He knows the price of a war horse in Lombardy, the weight of a mail hauberk wet with rain, the taste of dust on the road to Antioch. No one asks how, the telling is enough. Yet Gervais is no relic. When the blacksmith's boy coughs blood, it is Gervase who brews foxglove with honey. 3 drops, never 4. When the reeve's wife swears her cottage is haunted, he chalks a cross on the lintel and leaves a pinch of salt at each corner. Whether for demons or mice, only God could say. And once a month, when the bailiff rides through for taxes, Gervase limps out to greet him first, offering cordial smiles, a sprig of lavender, and a whispered reminder of an unpaid favour. The bailiff always leaves lighter of coin, heavier of doubt. Some nights the old man pauses mid-tale, staring at the fire, as if someone has called his name from the coals. Then he speaks a single line in Latin, soft, cracked, impossible to catch, and the tavern falls quiet. Even the hound under the bench lifts its head, listening. No one translates. Some things aren't meant for daylight. When the moment passes, Gervase blinks, smiles, drinks, and the room exhales. A traveller once asked him why he never settled in a cloister. Gervase shrugged, tapping the psalter. A book needs margins, wide space for the restless ink. Then he raised his cup, saluted the smoke-stained beams, the crooked tables, the doubtful souls, packed shoulder to shoulder, and said, "This is my margin, wide enough for every story still to come." Morning drifts into the tavern like thin smoke, and Father Gervase is already at the hearth, coaxing yesterday's embers with a bellows patched in 3 places, the leather sighing with each squeeze. He moves slowly, yet everything he does seems measured to the second. A pinch of ash to settle the flame, a twist of mugwort on the grill to sweeten the air, a quiet word for the one-eyed dog nosing at his boot. Outside, carts rumble toward the market square, wheels splashing through puddles left by night rain. Inside, the first patrons arrive, 2 charcoal burners, faces smeared black, as if sorrow itself had taken human form. They sit, grateful for warmth, and Gervase pours thin ale into earthen cups, adding a whisper of honey, because men who breathe soot all day deserve at least one kind thing before noon. He checks the physic's garden, stooping beneath dripping eaves. The rosemary shivers in the chill, but the rue stands stubborn, its bitter scent rising when he brushes the leaves. He trims just enough for a poultice and slips the sprigs into a pouch at his belt. The same belt that once cinched a novice's robe when Latin prayers still tasted new on his tongue. Back inside, he replaces the empty barrel brace with fresh timber. Hammer strokes steady, unhurried, echoing through rafters dark with age. The bailiff's ledger lies open on a corner table, forgotten by its owner after too much cider, and Gervase closes it softly, as one might shut the eyelids of a restless child. "Debts can wait until dusk," he mutters. "Debts always find a way to be paid." By midday the room swells. A cooper delivers staves tied with hemp. A peddler shakes water from a pack of tin charms. A young maid with red raw knuckles pleads for something to soothe the sting of lie. Gervase listens, nodding, grinding dried comfrey with wine until it forms a moss-green paste. He spreads it over linen, wraps the girl's hands, then lifts her chin so she hears the gentle warning, "Keep the bandage dry, and if the pain burns like coal, seek him before moonrise." She thanks him with a shy curtsy. No coin, only gratitude, but that is payment enough. The tavern keeper watches from the bar plank, and for a breath the noise dims, respect passing between 2 old generals holding different fronts of the same war against hunger and hurt. Afternoon brings stories out of hiding. Rain sets in again, drumming on the thatch, and the charcoal burners loosen their tongues. They speak of an overturned cart on the North Road. Sacks of barley burst open like torn bellies, grain soaking into mud, while the merchant wailed as though each kernel were a silver penny. They laugh, but there is no malice, only the rough humour of men who know the price of spilled sweat. Gervais listens, adding details to the map he keeps in his mind. The bend in the road, the broken wheel, the knot of traffic certain to follow. Knowledge, he says, is the only coin that never loses weight. And the burners nod, wiping foam from moustaches, flecked grey by fire and years. Toward evening, the blacksmith's boy arrives, coughing as though iron filings scrape his lungs. His mother, cheeks flushed from the forge, hovers like a startled bird. Gervais sits the lad near the hearth, wraps him in a horse blanket, still warm from a delivery cart, and steeps foxglove leaves in water, barely at the boil. The brew is bitter. The boy grimaces, tears leaking, but drinks under his mother's stern eye. Gervais waits, feeling the pulse at the child's wrist. Slow, then steadier. He offers the mother a small vial for the night, instructs her on dosage, and presses an extra sprig of lavender between her fingers to chase the anvil's clang from her dreams. She leaves a single horseshoe on the bench and thanks, edges filed smooth, a promise of repairs whenever his limp worsens. Night folds over the tavern, and with it come the dice men, knuckles scarred, laughter sharp as flint. Gervais settles at his usual bench, Salter closed but near, hands wrapped round a clay cup of watered wine. He does not roll dice, yet the gamblers glance his way between throws. Perhaps for luck, perhaps for judgment. A shout rises when sixes tumble across warped oak, coins scatter, someone accuses another of loaded bone, and chaos threatens. Gervais leans forward, clears his throat, only once, and the room stills. He reminds them, quietly, that St. Martin shared his cloak with a beggar on a night colder than this. Surely men of sound mind can share the table without blood. A pause, then uneasy chuckles, then coins gathered, game resumed, but softer. The tavern keeper lifts his cup toward Gervais, and the old man answers with a nod. Partnership forged in smoke and restraint. Near midnight, the rain stops, steam rises from the thatch like spirits taking wing. Patrons drift home by lantern glow, benches empty, the hearth settles into red hush. Gervais remains, mending a torn sleeve with crude stitches, humming a tune that might be plain song, might be memory. The one-eyed dog curls at his feet, content. When the last candle gutters, he closes the psalter, traces the burned corner with his thumb, and whispers that same Latin phrase no one can catch. Perhaps it is a blessing, perhaps a confession. Either way, the timbers seem to breathe easier, and the night holds. He limps to his cot in the loft, the climb slow but certain, each step marking the scene between another day of mortal aches and the fragile, faithful promise of dawn. And the tavern, though weary, keeps its silent vow to shelter every tale until the bell rings again. Smoke thins, curling toward the rafters like thoughts too shy to speak. And for the first time that day, the tavern hushes. Father Gervais sits alone at the embers, only a dog's slow breath, only rainwater ticking through a warped gutter. The lamps have been turned low, faces are shadows. Coin clatter has faded into the patient scrape of mugs being stacked for morning. He watches the fire settle, hears the hiss when a last drop of ale falls onto the grate, and lets memory drift where conversation cannot. He thinks of the charcoal men, black-streaked yet laughing, of the cooper's staves that will one day hold wine for weddings he will never attend, of the smith's boy sleeping now beneath lavender smoke, pulse steadier than hours ago. So much labour, he murmurs, for such fragile gain, yet without it, what stands? A roof, a road, a prayer. Outside, the night answers with wind scraping the shutters, reminding him that kingdoms and cottages rot at the same pace when care is absent. Gervase draws the psalter closer, fingers resting not on words but on the burned scar that mars its corner, a mark from the convent fire decades past, when a novice learned that parchment can turn to smoke faster than doubt can be forgiven. Loss, he thinks, is the first language every soul must speak. But then he recalls the charcoal men again, their laughter shaking soot loose like snow. He recalls the ladle in his own hand, stirring broth for strangers who will forget his name by dawn. If loss is a tongue, he decides service is the reply. A single coal pops, sparks arcing upward, and he smiles. How small a light is, yet how stubbornly it climbs. He wonders whether the Almighty counts sparks the way merchants count coin, each one a moment of warmth traded for a breath of timber. If so, tonight the balance sheet is honest. No excess, no deficit, only the quiet ledger of ordinary grace. He closes his eyes, lets a sigh ride the quiet. Perhaps, he thinks, healing is just the art of listening to other people's silences until they sound like song. Outside, the wind settles. Inside, the dog shifts, sighs, returns to dreams. Father Gervase lifts his mug, sips the last of the watered wine, bitter, humble, enough, and offers a toast to no one and to everyone. A soft benediction draped across the empty benches. May all wounds mend as slowly as they must, and no slower, for haste is the enemy of mercy. Then he sets the cup aside, and the tavern breathes on, cradle still, waiting for dawn. The hearth settles, its glow shrinking to a single line of amber, as though the night is folding the story back into itself. Around Father Gervase, the benches stand empty, bowls stacked, spoons crossed like tired swords. Even the candles bow, their wicks mere red pearls. He rises slowly. Old joints creak, robe brushes straw, and with one careful breath he stirs the last coal until it sighs into ash. That small sound is enough. In the hush that follows, every corner of the tavern seems to loosen its shoulders, grateful for quiet. Outside, dawn is still a rumour, but Gervase draws the bar across the door, sealing warmth within. He pauses, palm on wood, listening, not for voices, only for the heartbeat of the place, the pulse of embers, the slow wind at the eaves, the dog's muted dream whimper beneath the table. All is answered, all forgiven. He turns then, letting darkness claim the room, and with steady steps climbs a stair toward rest. Above, floorboards wait, cold as honest stone. Below, the fire remembers, and somewhere between those two silences, a new chapter begins to breathe. Dawn is a pale rumour, a thin grey brushstroke across the thatch, nothing more. Yet outside the tavern yard, the world already whispers. Hooves clop, slow and tired, along frost-stiff mud. Somewhere beyond the paling hedge, a cock clears his throat, then thinks better of it, and falls silent. Smoke drifts from the kitchen vent, thin as parchment, carrying the faint scent of singed oats. The night watchman, blanket still round his shoulders, leans on the gatepost, rubbing sleep from one eye, asking the cold to be patient. Farther off, mist grazes the meadow like a white ox, heavy-bellied, unhurried. An old mill wheel turns, creak, splash, turns again. Water glints, dull pewter beneath ice. No one calls, no bell rings. There is only the measured hush of a village, deciding whether to wake or roll deeper into dreams. Above it all, the tavern sign swings, one chain loose, one tight. So each slow gust makes the painted barrel tilt, nod, agree with secrets only wood can keep. And within the yard, 2 carts wait, one loaded with rough-cut timber, the other with empty casks. Frost webs the spokes, silver lace, proof that time has paused long enough for beauty, even here. It is the hour when promises feel possible, before debts stir, before words grow sharp, an hour made for steady footsteps, for breaths that bloom and vanish in the same soft instant. And as the first crow barks from the alder tree, once, twice, the village exhales, accepting that morning, whether welcome or not, has crossed the threshold. They call him Master Otto the Cooper, though titles sit lightly on shoulders already burdened by 40 winters of oak and iron. Every cask in this valley has felt his mallet. Every inn, with luck, has blessed his name. Yet few have met the man before the dawn, when trade and noise still dream. Otto stands beside those waiting carts, lantern guttering at his hip, palms tracing the rim of a half-hooped barrel. Thick fingers, scarred by stave and adze, move with a gentleness reserved for violins and newborn lambs. He listens, head tilted, to the hollow note each tap returns. Thunk, thunk, a cooper's private liturgy. If the tone rings even, the staves sit true. If it wobbles, he sighs, loosens the band, begins again. No haste, no cursing, only rhythm, patience, repetition. He was born during the famine, winter of 46, when ale soured in cracked tubs and rain rotted grain before harvest. His father, desperate, traded the family mule for a bundle of iron hoops and a promise from the guild. Learn the craft, feed your kin. Otto learned. By 13 he could split oak straight as scripture. By 20 he travelled fair to fair, patching vats for brewers who paid in bread, salt, and worn silver. Rumour claims the emperor's own vintners once sought him, but the valley needed casks more than courts needed jewels, so he remained. There is pride in that choice, quiet, unpolished, sturdy as the barrels themselves. Villagers swear his casks keep ale sweet longer, that wine shipped in Otto's work arrives brighter, kinder to the tongue. They swear, too, that when plague shadowed the county last autumn, he reforged every cooper's hoop into makeshift cauldrons, so healers could boil water without fear of leaks. He charged nothing, asked only that the dead be remembered. Now, as dawn unwraps the day, stitch by silver stitch, Otto sets the final band, wipes resin from the rim, and breathes. The barrel answers with a soft, satisfied hush, the sound of a promise sealed against time, travel, and thirst. The village stirs, not with trumpets or church bells, but with the muffled thunk of an iron hoop settling against oak. Otto lifts the finished barrel onto a handcart, slow, careful, as though placing a child into a crib, and wheels it toward the tavern yard. Dawn is a thin grey ribbon. Roosters hesitate, unsure if this light is real. He moves anyway. Mist clings to the valley floor, softening shutters, dulling cobblestones. Somewhere a baker splits kindling. Crack, hiss, flame catches, and the first breath of rye drifts across the square. Otto pauses beneath the inn's sagging sign, inhales, feels the hunger of a whole village waiting to rise. Then the door groans, wider than dawn itself, and Elsa, the innkeeper, waves him through. No words, just a nod that means thank you. Hurry, the ale is running shy. Inside, benches still glisten from last night's spillages. Tankards lie where they fell, some upended like helmets after battle, some upright, bravely holding the last inch of foam. Otto tips each barrel from the cart, one after another, easing them into the cool shadow beside the hearth. He taps a stave, hollow, true, and the inn boys cheer under their breath, fresh cask, better morning. Elsa presses a clay mug of small beer into his hand, barley thin, barely strong, but warm enough to settle the chill in his fingers. Work done, he steps back into the street. Daylight thickens, cloud white, milk pale, revealing neighbours already bent to their tasks. The smith pumps his bellows, sparks leap like startled fireflies. A washerwoman unfurls linens across a rope, her arms making wide, slow arcs, snow geese taking flight. Children chase wooden hoops along the lane, laughter striking stone walls, rebounding, high, shrill, alive. Otto watches, lips twitching, not quite a smile, more the memory of one. By mid-morning, he heads for the cooper's shed, on the hill, low roof, wide door, scent of resin and smoke baked into every beam. Sunlight pierces knotholes, laying thin gold ladders across the floor. He chooses a plank of Tyrolean oak, tests the grain with thumb and nail. If it sings, clear, dry, willing, he nods. The adze rises, falls, rises. Rhythm slower than a drum, faster than a prayer. Shavings curl away like pale ribbons. They pile at his boots, mute witness to the hour. Noon brings a brief ceasefire. Otto wipes sweat with the back of his forearm, unwraps bread crusts and a sliver of goat cheese. Yesterday's wages. He eats beside the open door, watching swallows stitch the sky, tail to wing to tail, never landing. From here the valley spreads, patchwork of barley gold, flax blue, forest green, each colour breathing under the sun. Somewhere below a church bell counts the hour, 1, 2, then silence. Afternoon leans long. Staves now ring the workshop walls, tall, slender soldiers waiting their turn. Otto heats iron hoops in the brazier until they glow faint ember red. With tongs, he lowers them over the barrel's rim. Wood steams, squeals, settles. A quick douse of water seals the bond. Shh. Smoke swirls around his wrists, scented with sap and iron. Another barrel born, another promise made. As dusk slides in, lavender, ash, rose, he latches the shed, palms the doorframe once, habit, blessing, and climbs the track toward home. Crickets wake in the tall grass. A nightjar calls from the alder. The river below turns pewter under the first shy star. Otto's cottage waits, one candle in the window, chair by the hearth, tools resting against the wall like tired friends. He will sit, roll his shoulders, perhaps mutter a tune his mother knew. Nothing merry, nothing sad, just 5 notes looping like a wheel. Somewhere beyond the ridge, carts rattle toward distant towns, each loaded with fresh-made casks, sealed tight against time, stamped with a simple mark. 2 interlocked rings, hammered deep. Traders may never meet the man, may never hear the valley's name, yet tomorrow they will lift a lid, taste ale still sweet, and wonder why. And high on the hill, Otto will already be listening for that first hollow thunk of another day beginning. The evening drifts, quieter now, as if the valley has drawn a long breath and chosen to hold it. Otto sits on the low stone wall outside his cottage, coat draped across one knee, palms still scented faintly of oak and smoke. The last light gathers on the far ridge, thin, amber, before slipping behind the trees. He watches, not hurried, not slow, merely present, the way a mill pond keeps the moon without claiming it. A neighbour's lantern flickers to life, single flame in a window square, and Otto thinks how fragile a light can seem, yet how stubbornly it clings to the dark. He wonders, though he would never say it aloud, why men spend their days shaping barrels, blades, bread, always something meant to be filled, emptied, then filled again. Perhaps that rhythm is comfort, or perhaps it is simply the only language time allows. The night air tastes of lentil stew carried on someone's doorstep, of damp heather, of wood smoke settling into moss. Somewhere below, the indoor creaks open. Laughter spills, then stills. Another cask tapped. Another story begun. Otto nods to the echo, knowing his craft is already speaking for him in places his voice never travels. A simple barrel, yes, but inside each stave lies a season of rain, a summer of sun-drawn sap, a winter of patient curing, and a man's quiet pledge that nothing made by honest hands is ever truly small. He traces the grain of a fallen twig, spiral within spiral, and recalls his father saying that wood remembers every wind it has danced with. Otto believes people are much the same. A touch, a word, a single promise can leave rings no eye will see, yet no heart will forget. Above, the first stars kindle, pale sparks strewn across indigo, old, distant, indifferent. Still their light reaches him, crosses gulfs he cannot name, settles on the curve of his shoulder like a silent blessing. Otto exhales, slow, steady, and in that hush between breath and shadow, he feels the day soften, the valley lean closer, and the world, for one unmeasured moment, sit perfectly balanced, quiet as a barrel's rim beneath a steady hand. The night settles, thick and slow, like honey left by the hearth. Otto rises, brushing wood dust from his palms, and the valley seems to breathe with him, deep, patient, unhurried. He turns toward the cottage door, pausing to listen. A distant owl, the low murmur of river against stone, the faint clink of mugs far below. Each sound folds into silence, then drifts away, leaving only the hush of waiting stars. Inside, a single candle waits, small flame, steady heart. Otto lights it, cups the glow, and you might notice, if you were there, how the light curls around his fingers, painting quiet gold across worn knuckles and half-mended sleeve. He sets the candle beside his tools, whispers something only cedar shavings could answer, then eases the shutters closed. One latch, another. The night stays out, yet somehow settles in, warmer, softer, kinder. He sits once more, just a breath, hands resting, thoughts dimming, and the world outside slips into velvet dark. Tomorrow will bring new timber, new staves, new stories carried within the grain. But for now, the barrel maker sleeps, the valley dreams, and the candle, small guardian of slumber, keeps its gentle watch until even its flame chooses to fade. So let the lids of the mountains fall, let the river hum its secret lullaby, and follow the quiet into the next chapter, where dawn will rise slow, and the first note of morning will feel as old and as new as the hand-turned rim of an honest barrel. Dawn steals across the valley, pale, careful, almost shy. A single line of lavender touches the ridge, then widens, washing the mist in muted rows. Birds clear their throats one by one, testing the air. A distant cock answers, then silence settles again. Soft, expectant. Below, the village roofs lie slick with dew, thatch darkened to near black. Smoke rises from just 2 chimneys, thin threads, straight as needles in the windless hush. Somewhere, a hand pump creaks, water splashes, and the sound hangs, suspended, as if even the mountains hold their breath to listen. Down the slope, the cooper's cottage glows faintly. Its shutters ease open. Otto appears, heavy cloak drawn close against the dying chill. He stands on the threshold, broad shoulders, grey in the half-light, then steps aside, letting the scent of pine shavings drift into morning. No words, no whistle, only the slow pull of frost-laden air into his lungs and out again, like a forge bellows working at quarter strength. The road beyond is nothing more than damp earth rutted by cartwheels. Puddles mirror newborn sky. Each stone shines, slick, bright, before dimming as light strengthens. Otto's boots find the familiar path. He nods to the village well, to the greening willows, to the sparrows fussing beneath the eaves. Nothing answers, yet it feels somehow like greeting old friends. By the river, mist lifts in thin swirls, ghosts abandoning water. A barge pole knocks against its mooring, hollow and deep. That rhythm, slow, sure, matches Otto's stride. He pauses, studying the timber stacked under canvas. Fresh ash, still beaded with last night's rain. His thumb presses the grain. He listens, as carpenters do, for the whisper of sound wood, steady, tight, alive. Above, the sun slips a little higher, no blaze, just a widening hush of gold. And the day, like a wheel notched in patience, begins its turn. Otto Hinterwald, the cooper, whose barrels find their way to every tavern from Ulm to the widening Rhine, did not begin as a master of curved staves. He was born at the tail of a long winter in a hut that smelled of goat tallow and damp linen. His father shaped yew bows for mercenaries. His mother pressed wild herbs into poultices no priest could rival. Work, then, was never a choice, only a rhythm he learned before speech. At 15, he followed a wine merchant south, mending casks for sour reds and sweeter lies. There, in dim storerooms lit by rushlights, he discovered that oak sings if you cut it true. Every stave must bend, but never break. By 23, he could spot a knot by scent alone, shave a lid so snug not a drop would dare escape. War came, as wars do. Armies drank quicker than cellars could fill. Silver flowed, then pewter, then promises. Otto laboured through harvests when soldiers trampled vines faster than peasants could bind them. He learned, too, that a barrel can be shield and cradle both. One rolling circle of refuge when arrows search a courtyard. Now, at 58, his hair keeps the colour of smoked birch. The scar above his brow, earned when a hoop split under frost, lurks like a pale crescent moon. Strangers notice the silence around him first. He weighs words the way he weighs seasoned planks, testing balance, listening for hidden flaw. Yet the village knows another side, how he hums low hymns while planing edges, how children sneak chips of cedar from his workshop, certain they smell of distant oceans. If you had stood by his bench last summer, you might have seen a faded ribbon tucked inside the tool chest. A widow's ribbon, saved since plague took her in 46. Otto never speaks of it. He only sands a little slower whenever the cloth shifts in the draught. So when dawn stretches over the valley and he lifts that first rim of oak, the day itself seems to steady, waiting for his hammer's measured tap, the heartbeat that keeps ale safe through winter, and keeps a small, patient village certain that not all things break when the world turns hard. The village wakes slow, always slower than the Cooper. Otto has been at the stream since first grey light, rinsing a willow bucket, feeling the water nip his wrists, like a reminder that spring is only a rumour this far into March. He stands, stretches, and listens. Sparrows quarrel in the rafters of the half-collapsed mill. A distant ewe complains for no reason but morning. Smoke from 3 chimneys climbs crooked through the chill. Nothing urgent, nothing loud, just the soft machinery of a valley that still trusts its own pulse. Back in the yard, he flips the iron latch, rusted into the shape of habit, and slips inside the workshop. The room breathes resin, oak, ash, a touch of last year's pine. Every tool hangs where it should. Every shaving on the floor remembers the angle of the blade that birthed it. Otto likes that order. It keeps sorrow outside, he once murmured to the priest. And the priest, hearing grief rather than carpentry, said nothing at all. He sets a plank against the shaving horse, secures it with a leather strap, and begins to plane. Long strokes, each one coaxing the wood into a truth it carried since seed. Shh, cries the steel. Shh, answers the grain. Between passes, he turns the board, eyes narrow, feeling for hidden whirl, listening for that thunk no Cooper wants to hear. Outside, children chase a hoop down the lane, laughter spilling like coins. Otto half smiles, but the plane never pauses. Mid-morning, a customer arrives. Herr Brandt, the brewer from 2 valleys north, coat too fine for these parts. He ducks beneath the lintel, clearing his throat more than speech requires, as though dignity might fog in the sawdust. They barter without numbers. Brandt lifts a sample stave, knocks its edge, sniffs the fresh cut. Otto waits, then tilts his head just so. A price hides in the gesture. Brandt nods, produces a small pouch, and pours 6 silver pfennigs onto the bench. 1 coin rolls, stops against Otto's thumb, scratched with a cross, dull at the rim. Payment accepted, the brewer bows, promises a cart by dusk, and departs, boots crunching frost that lingers where sun ignores. Noon folds itself inside the walls. The Cooper lays tools aside, ladles broth from a pot kept on a slow ember, turnip, barley, a whisper of ham, gifted by the tanner's wife when her youngest survived the cough. He eats standing, gaze drifting to the ribbon in the drawer, still, silent, still. Outside, bells from the distant abbey count 12 echoes, each softer than the last. Work resumes. Hoops are heated over coals until they glow dull red, then slid, careful, quick, around the rising belly of the barrel. Steam snarls when hot iron greets soaked staves. Otto tightens a windlass. Creak, creak, until the wood surrenders, bending inward, joining its neighbours in a circle older than scripture. He murmurs a rhyme learned from his mother, half prayer, half timing. Oak, heed the iron, iron, spare the oak. No spectators, but he bows his head all the same. Afternoon light tilts, spills gold across the north wall, where saw marks dance like tiny shadow ladders. A boy appears, Caspar, the miller's runt, cheeks smudged with flour. He brings a cracked keg, needs it mended before the festival. Otto inspects the break, a clean split along a knot the boy never saw. He motions Caspar closer, places the child's hand on the fault line, lets him feel the weakness. Wood remembers, he says, voice low, each word a slow tack hammered into the air. Treat it gentle before it breaks, not after. Casper nods, wide-eyed, pockets the lesson like a stolen treat, then watches as the cooper replaces 2 staves, sands a fresh groove, and seats a hoop with 3 measured taps. Not 4, never 4, rhythm is law. Evening edges in, the blue hour when rooks scribble black lines across the sky. Brant's cart clatters through the gate. Helpers unload sacks of hops, load finished casks, stack them too high. Otto signs a tally he cannot read. His mark is enough, and refuses Brant's offered wine. Too sweet, he claims. The brewer shrugs, flicks reins, and is swallowed by dust and twilight. Tools clean, fire banked, the cooper steps outside. The lane glows with lanterns. Somewhere a fiddler tests a tune for nightfall revellers. Otto inhales cold that tastes of peat and whetstone, then turns toward the churchyard. Pause. No, not tonight. Instead, he walks the edge of the brook, where water threads dark between stones, patient, unhurried. He kneels, cups a handful, lets it spill through fingers, cracked by frost and work. Reflections wobble. A half-moon, distant roofs, the shape of a man marrying silence. Above, stars gather, like iron filings, to an invisible magnet. Otto rises, brushes knees, and heads home. Inside the hut, the hearth still smoulders. He adds a sliver of beach, watches tiny sparks flit upward, then drown in soot. His hands hover near the warmth. No need for more words. Tomorrow waits, and wood and water, and the steady thump of a mallet that keeps the valley turning. Outside, the night settles over timber and thatch, over barrels stacked in Brent's rumbling cart, over boys chasing hoops that have rolled out of breath. Somewhere beyond, war tents dot a distant field, but here, for now, the only drum is the slow river, and the only shield is a ring of oak bound tight by iron and a cooper's quiet vow. They say that barrels outlive the brewers who fill them, and Otto believes it. Each ring he drives today might still cradle ale when his own name is no more than a blurred mark in a church ledger. Standing by the dying light, he watches steam drift from the last hoop, thin, silver, and stubborn, then fade into the rafters where spider threads remember every winter since the plague. It strikes him that wood and iron accept their purpose without argument. Oak submits to fire, iron bends to water. Both learn to hold what neither can taste. Men, he thinks, are slower students. They boast, they hoard, they pray for miracles, while ignoring the quiet miracle of a stave meeting its neighbour at precisely the right angle. Somewhere beyond the hills, soldiers sharpen blades for lords who will forget them. Merchants haggle over coins that change hands faster than stories. Yet here, a valley tucked between unremarkable ridges, time is measured in shavings on a floor, in saplings, counting backward to summers no chronicle bothers to note. Otto wonders if greatness was ever the point. Perhaps the world is kept alive not by kings or battles, but by tasks no one applauds. A cooper sealing grain against damp, a midwife guiding breath, a shepherd mending the same fence each spring. He fingers the smooth rim of a newly finished cask, feels the pulse of his own blood in the whirls of the wood, and senses how briefly both will beat. Still, tomorrow the sun will clear the ridge, children will chase hoops, and smoke will lift straight into the blue. Signals that work remains, modest but necessary. And that, he decides, is enough, more than enough. for any honest life that hopes to leave the world no darker than it found it. Night has folded itself around the valley, a wide dark cloak pinpricked with embers from distant hearths. Otto sets the final cask upright, hears the soft thunk of settled wood, then breathes, long and slow. Beyond the copperidge door, the river murmurs, steady as always, carrying moonlight and sawdust downstream. He douses the forge, hangs the hammer on its peg, and wipes resin from his palms. Ordinary gestures that feel tonight almost ceremonial. For a moment, he stands in the doorway, just a silhouette, watching mist rise where water meets meadow. It is quiet and good. Tomorrow will summon the same blunt chores, the same damp air, the same small satisfactions. Yet he understands now that repetition is not a chain, but a rhythm, one that keeps the world from drifting into silence. With a nod to the empty road, he slips the iron latch, whispers a prayer learned from his mother. Nothing grand, only may the staves hold, may the night be kind. The wind dances with the faint scent of wood smoke and rye, and so the shop sleeps, the valley exhales, and the story, still warm, turns its page to the next unhurried dawn. The forge is dark now, only a red memory glows beneath the ash, and outside the river slips past like a low hymn no one quite remembers. Winter has loosened its grip, not gone, merely drifting, and the first thawing breeze moves through the valley, soft, tentative, carrying the faint, wet scent of moss and turned earth. Somewhere downstream, a night heron calls. Elsewhere, a shutter taps, slow and hollow, as though the village itself is exhaling after a long, patient vigil. He, old Otto, broad-shouldered still, though the years have worn his spine into a gentle bow, steps from the threshold and closes the door behind him. The latch settles with a small, sure click. Above the rooftops, a pale moon slants through tattered clouds, brushing damp thatch with silver threads. Beneath it, frost retreats from the fields, leaving fine beads that glimmer like pinned stars along every blade of grass. Otto pauses, hand on the cool iron of the handle, and lets the hush surround him. He hears no hammer, no saw, no distant cart, only the pulse of running water, and his own slow breath. A thought stirs, quiet as embers beneath ash. The work is ended, but the story continues. He imagines tomorrow's barrels accepting wine from autumn's harvest, imagines young hands, Stefan's perhaps, or Marta's steady, ink-stained fingers, smoothing new hoops where his once gripped. The craft will outlive the craftsman. That is comfort enough. He smiles, a small inward curve, and lifts his lantern. Its flame blooms, a tiny sun, painting the mud path in thin, amber strokes. Otto turns toward the slope that leads home. Step by measured step, he follows the familiar track, boots sinking softly in thaw-loosened earth, lantern swaying, ribs rising and falling in an easy rhythm. Night gathers behind him. Ahead, dawn waits, folded inside the dark, like a secret letter sealed in wax. He thinks of those who might still lie wakeful, the sentry on the far hill, the miller nursing a stubborn worry, the restless child chasing shapes in chimney shadow, and he sends them a silent benediction. Rest. Let the river carry what weight it can. A final glance over his shoulder. The copperidge stands quiet, windows dim yet solid, a silhouette of modest pride against the moonlit bank. Otto raises 2 fingers to the brim of his cap, a wordless good night, then walks on. And as the lantern light dwindles, the valley slips deeper into stillness. wrapped in the soft promise of another ordinary dawn. So, traveller, breathe slowly. The fire is banked, the doors are barred, the barrels stand firm. May your own burdens settle like dust upon cool stone. May sleep come gently, tread softly, linger long. Tomorrow waits, patient, unhurried, beneath these same slow stars. The path climbs, gentle, steady, each step a quiet drum against the hillside. Behind Otto, the river's murmur slips back into distance until it becomes only a notion of sound, like memory humming at the edge of thought. Ahead, the orchard waits, bare branches etched against a velvet sky, buds sealed tight, yet already dreaming of blossom. Last year's wind-fallen apples lie softened in the grass, their sweet sour scent mingling with thawed earth. Even decay whispers of renewal. He pauses beneath the oldest pear tree, crooked, hollow-hearted, but alive, stubbornly alive. A fox once denned beneath its roots. Tonight, only moonlight curls inside the cavity, pale and patient. Otto rests a palm on the rough bark, feels the subtle warmth held beneath rising sap, and breathes. Years ago, he planted graflings along this slope, hopeful stitches binding soil to story. Tonight, he feels the weight of that hope settling into his bones, not heavy, but sure, like a promise kept. Farther downslope, the village roof lines glint, pewter tiles, straw combs, timber beams, every home a quiet ember beneath its own patch of night. He thinks of Marta's mother, mending wool by candle, of young Stefan, tracing letters in soot upon the hearthstone, of old Fräulein Linke, counting rosary beads that have outlasted 3 wars and 3 husbands. Lives weave, intersect, part, return, threads glimmering through years like lanterns along a river bend. Otto knows, no craft is lonelier than living, and no company steadier than time. A sudden wind lifts, not harsh, but brisk, carrying the smell of distant fir, and for a moment the lantern gutter flickers. He cups the flame, shielding it with knotted fingers, and in that private dome of light the years fold inward. A boy apprenticed to a silent master, a soldier limping home with iron in his calf and snow in his hair, a young husband carrying cradle boards up this very slope, whispering names for children not yet born. All of it held, then released like breath into darkness. He rounds the last bend, his cottage appears, small, whitewashed, roof-bowed slightly, under centuries of winters. Smoke thins from the chimney. Elisa must have banked the stove hours ago. Warmth awaits behind that door, peat glow, supper crusts, the soft hush of sleeping hens in the lean-to. Yet Otto lingers at the gate. He lifts the latch but does not enter. Instead, he turns his gaze skyward, and the heavens answer. Stars scatter, flawless, indifferent, familiar. Orion reclines above the barn roof. The Pleiades shimmer like frost caught mid-fall. Somewhere beyond human reckoning, whole constellations wheel unseen, worlds birthing, dying, flaring like sparks in smithy dark. Otto feels their silent rhythm align with the slow tide of his pulse. The forge inside the ski never cools, he muses, and every ember finds its place. He sets the lantern on the sill, lets its orange halo mingle with silver moonshine, and draws a long, even breath. Then softly he speaks, voice almost lost to wind. Rest easy, travellers, the night holds you. Perhaps he addresses the seedlings under snow, or the fox curled in the hollow, or the nameless wanderer pausing on some far road. Perhaps he speaks to you, yes, you listening in the hush between heartbeats. If so, let the words settle, low and calm. Lay down your worries beside the hearth. Let the coals cradle them until they glow faint, then fade. Feel the weight slip from your shoulders, seep through timber, find the quiet ground. Inside the cottage, a floorboard creaks. Elisa stirring, half dreaming, sensing his presence. Otto lifts the latch at last. The door shifts open with a sigh. Wood greeting wood. Warm dark enfolds him. Peat smoke, rosemary, linen cooled by night. He hangs the lantern on its hook, flame wobbling once before steadying. Boots off, cloak folded across the bench. He moves, careful, practiced, toward the bedroom door. Yet before crossing that threshold, he glances back, offering one more benediction to the sleeping valley. Tomorrow will come, and we will meet it gently. The door clicks, footfalls hush, and stillness deepens. So now, friend, let the story loosen its weave, fade, settle. Imagine the lantern's glow dimming to an ember. Imagine frost melting from the orchard grass, leaving diamonds that soon become nothing more than water returning to soil. Imagine dawn's first thrush clearing its throat in the hedgerow, testing a note, then falling silent again. Not yet, not yet. Night remains, and it is generous. Lie where you are, shoulders sinking, breath lengthening, and feel the room cool around you, not cold, only serene, like river stones after sunset. Every sound retreats. The clock's slow tick becomes a heartbeat. The neighbor's dog, a distant drum. Even the wind steps softly now, afraid to wake the soil. If thoughts stir, lists, doubts, echoes of unfinished conversations, let them pass by like travelers on a moonlit road. You need not greet them. They will find their own inns farther along. Your task is smaller, sweeter, to rest, to drift, to dream of pear trees in early blossom and rivers unspooling silver threads across morning fields. Perhaps you will walk those fields with Otto. Hear larks rise, feel peat warm beneath your soles. Perhaps you will follow the river, past the village, past the mill, into hills where new stories wait, patient and quiet. Or perhaps you will simply sleep, deep, effortless, while the world turns one more graceful revolution. Wherever you go, may peace be the path. And when daylight finally brushes your eyelids, may you wake like the valley itself, hushed, replenished, ready to shape the soft clay of another ordinary, miraculous day. For now, close your eyes, breathe once more, and let the forge of worry cool. Good night, and gentle dreams. No more fields to cross, no more lanterns to trim. Only breath, slow even, turning like a wheel beneath the ribs. Let it circle, lower, quieter. Somewhere, far from clocks or calendars, the moon slips behind a cloud. Shadows knit themselves into one single cloth of dark, soft as wool, laid gently across the countryside of your mind. If a worry flickers, greet it with silence, the way snow greets a falling leaf, catching, holding, melting it into calm. And should any echo of the day still linger, tuck it beside the hearth of your heart with the others, ashes waiting to be stirred into morning tea. Light, harmless, already losing shape. Nothing left to do, nothing left to name. Only this velvet hush and the quiet promise that night keeps for every traveller. You are safe, you are held, you may rest now. The coals sink, one by one, until only the faintest glow lingers beneath the ash, a small red memory breathing in the dark. Outside, the wind drifts lower, along the eaves, humming the same slow note it has carried for centuries, a lullaby older than words, steady as tide. You feel it, don't you? The way the room grows softer when you close your eyes, the way the night folds in around your shoulders, like a well-worn cloak found at the foot of your childhood bed. Listen, an owl calls once, then settles, even its wings have chosen rest. Somewhere beyond these walls a river turns, patient silver, sure of its own direction. Let every heartbeat follow that water, away from loud corridors of thought, toward a quiet meadow where nothing is required except the simple art of being here. And if a distant bell inside the mind still rings, let the darkness answer it, a single, gentle note dissolving into wider silence. So breathe, long, low, unhurried. Hold that breath a moment, then give it back to the room, to the night, to the ground that cradles every dreamer. In this hush, promises keep themselves. Dawn will come, seeds will wake, roads will open, but not yet, not now. Now there is only this cradle of ours, this ancient fire of stars, this soft permission to drift, sleep, and be carried